Hi, I'm Stephanie Jaworski of joybaking.com. Today we're going to make a pumpkin spice cake, and this is what it looks like. We have 2 layers of a really nice buttery and lightly spiced pumpkin cake covered with a cream cheese frosting. So first, preheat your oven to 350 degrees Fahrenheit, which is 180 degrees Celsius, and you will need 2 8-inch, that's 20 centimeter round cake pans. And to prepare them, what we're going to do is butter them, or you could spray them with one of those non-stick vegetable sprays. And I like to use melted butter. I find it a lot easier than to use a cold butter. And then you just use a pastry brush. Make sure you do it well, because we don't want our cakes sticking to the pan. And then what I do is just take a round of parchment paper and put that on the bottom, because that way it really won't stick to the bottom of the pan. So now, if you have an electric stand mixer like I have, use a paddle attachment, or you could use a hand mixer for this. So the first thing we need for this cake batter is a ½ cup, that's 113 grams of butter. Have that at room temperature. Now, I prefer unsalted butter. I like the flavor better, and I also like to be able to control the salt, but you can use salted butter if that's what you like. So what I'm going to do is just beat this, maybe for a minute, just until it gets nice and creamy. Okay. And as always, when you're making a batter, scrape down the sides and the bottom of the pan as much as you need, of your bowl, as much as you need to. Make sure everything gets all mixed together. So what we're going to add now is 1 1/4 cups, which is 260 grams of firmly packed light brown sugar. And, left a little there. Now I'm going to beat this on medium-high speed until the mixture is really nice and light and fluffy, because we want to get some air into our batter. So this is what you're looking for. Just get some air in there, and that'll make a lighter cake. So our next thing is we're going to add 2 large eggs, and again, have those at room temperature. And we're going to add them one at a time. Add one, mix it in, and then add the second one. And along with that, I'm going to add a teaspoon of pure vanilla extract, just for a little flavoring. A good stir. So now, of course, we need pumpkin, since it's a pumpkin spice cake. So you will need 1 cup, which by weight is about 220 grams of pure pumpkin, and that's like pumpkin puree. And that, if you're buying it in a can, is without the spices, just plain, because we're going to add our own spices. Now, when you beat this in, your batter will curdle, because we have so much wet ingredients here. Don't worry about that, because once we add our flour, it'll just smooth right out. Okay, that looks good. So I'll show you. As you can see, it's quite curdled. As soon as we add our flour, that's going to smooth right out, so don't worry. So now, in a separate bowl, I have 2 cups of sifted cake flour. So that means you sift your flour first and then measure it in your, spoon it into your measuring cup. By weight, that's 200 grams. So then you could just measure it and then sift it, whichever way, if you're doing it by weight. And then to that, we're going to add 1/4 teaspoon of baking powder, 1 teaspoon of baking soda, 1/4 teaspoon of salt, and then 1/2 teaspoon of ground cinnamon, 1/4 teaspoon of ground ginger, and just a pinch, about 1/8 teaspoon of ground cloves. Now I'm just going to dump all that in there. Now, if you want, you could adjust your spices the way, if you want more of something or less. So now I'm just going to use a wire whisk to whisk everything together. You could sift this as well. You really want to make sure that you get that baking powder and baking soda mixed into your flour. Otherwise, you can sometimes get a little bitter tasting if it's not thoroughly mixed in. And then what we're going to do is add our flour in 3 additions and alternate that with our buttermilk. Now you will need 1/2 cup to 120 milliliters of buttermilk, and have that at room temperature. Now, some people say they can't find buttermilk, so just take 1/2 cup of just regular milk and stir in 1/2 tablespoon of either lemon juice or vinegar. Just stir that together. Let it sit 10 minutes, and then you have your own homemade buttermilk. So now I'm just going to add about 1/3 of this flour mixture, and as always, keep your mixer kind of on low speed so the flour doesn't come up in your face. And then I'm going to add 1/2 of our buttermilk. More of my flour. A real good scrape down here. We're almost done. And then the rest of our flour. Okay, that looks good. Isn't that a beautiful looking batter? This cake is especially popular in the fall and winter months, but I think it's great any time of the year. And you can buy, good thing is you can buy canned pumpkin all year round, so make it anytime. Okay, so now what we're going to do is just divide the batter between our 2 pans. If you want to be really accurate, you can use a scale here, but we'll eyeball it. You want to get fairly even so that they bake in the same length of time. I think that looks pretty good. So then you can take the back of a spoon, or I've got one of these little offset spatulas, and smooth it out as best as you can. Okay, so now in my oven I find that these take around 25 minutes, 25 to 30. I mean, everybody's oven is different, so it could take a few minutes less, a few minutes more, but you want to bake them just until toothpick inserted into center comes out clean. Okay, so our pumpkin cakes are now done. A toothpick inserted into the center will come out clean. So now what I'm going to do is just let them cool on the wire rack for about 10-15 minutes, and when we come back I'll show you how to remove them from the pan. So now to remove the cake from the pan, just take either a knife or a spatula and just run it around just to make sure it's not sticking to the sides. And then just take another rack, flip it, and peel off the paper. And then we're going to turn it the right side up again. So now what we're going to do is let these cool completely, and then we'll make our frosting. So now we're going to make our cream cheese frosting. Again, if you have a stand mixer like I do, use your paddle attachment, or you can use a hand mixer for this, or even a wooden spoon. So you will need 1/4 cup, 55 grams of butter. You could use either salted or unsalted, whichever you'd like. Have that at room temperature, along with 8 ounces, 225 grams of full fat cream cheese, and have that at room temperature as well. And so I'm just going to beat these together until they're nice and creamy and smooth. Okay, that looks good. As you can see, it's just nicely mixed together. And now, I'm going to flavor our frosting a little differently this time than a regular cream cheese. I'm going to add some maple syrup. And I'm going to add, I like to use the pure maple syrup, about 1.5 tablespoons. Just gives it a really nice subtle maple flavor, which goes so nice with the pumpkin. So I'm just going to mix that in. And so now I'm going to add in 3 cups, that's 350 grams of confectioner sugar. You may know that is either powdered or icing sugar, and sift that because icing sugar usually has lumps. So I'm just going to add that in. And then we're going to beat this until it's really nice and light and fluffy. And then we'll check the consistency, because we may need to add a little more maple syrup to thin it out, or we may need to add a little more sugar depending. Now do this carefully because that's a lot of sugar. So let's check our consistency here. That looks pretty good. Now at this point, if it was too thick, you could add a little more maple syrup to thin it out, and conversely, if it was too thin, you could add a little more sugar. Now I'm really happy with that to spread on our cake. Okay, so now I'm just going to clean up here and set up our cakes, and when we come back I will show you how to frost. So now we're ready to frost our cake. So I'm using a turntable. It makes things easier to frost. You don't need it. You can just put it on your cake pedestal or on your plate that you're going to serve it with. Now I like to, one way to easily kind of be able to lift up your cake is to use these cake rounds, cardboard cake rounds. You can get them at cake decorating stores or even online. And then you just slip it underneath like that. And then it's very easy to move your cake, or if you're giving it as a gift. So I'm just going to just put a little icing there. Just it won't stick or move around as I'm trying to frost the cake. So now what we're going to do is take about, depends how much you want, about 1/2 cup or so. I'm just going to eyeball this. If I need more, I'll add more or take some off. And then you could use a knife, spoon, or I'm just using spatula. It's still sliding a bit, but you don't need to go right out to the edge when you're frosting your layer, because when you put the top layer on. Now, if you wanted a really flat top cake, what you can do is flip the cake and just really have the bottom as the top, and that will give you that more, I guess you'd say, professional look. I like a more casual looking cake, so I don't mind a little bit of a dome, or some people actually slice off that little dome, but I kind of like the look of it. So that looks just a touch more. Okay, then we're just going to take our, now make sure your cakes have completely cooled when you go, or else a warm cake will melt your frosting, which we don't want. And so now we're just going to, now again, you could just frost, if you wanted to leave the sides bare, you could just frost the top, but what we'll do today is do the top and the sides. Just kind of go back and forth to try to get it to spread. Try to get it nice and even, okay? Look gorgeous. And then work your way around the sides, just like so. Just kind of wiggle back and forth with your frosting. Okay, almost done. Looks pretty good. Now it depends. Now if you want, I kind of like it more like this, not really smooth. If you want it, and the sides the same thing, I kind of like just a little rough. But if you wanted it like really smooth, what you can do is just lightly press your spatula kind of at an angle, and then just go around. Keep going around, and then it really, as you can see, it'll really smooth it out if you wanted it. And you just keep going around, and the same with the top. If you wanted it smooth, you just kind of have it very lightly, don't press real hard with your spatula, and just go around to get that flat top. Although I'm more of a casual look for this cake. But now, if you saw at the beginning, I had a little orange decoration. So what I did is I kept a little bit of our frosting. Now you could also decorate the top of this cake with nuts, either a whole nut like pecans or walnuts would be very good. Or you could finely chop them and sprinkle over the top. There's a lot of different things you could do. Let your imagination run wild here. So what I'm going to do is I have a little bit of frosting, and I'm taking some orange food coloring. This is the paste kind. Either, I mean, you could use the liquid, it really doesn't matter, whatever you prefer. Let's see if that's enough. Yeah, that looks pretty good. Paste food coloring is, I find it gives you really vibrant colors. So that's a nice shade, I think. We'll go with that. So now I'm going to just, you could just use like a freezer bag, any type of plastic bag. This is the disposable type with just a small, round, plain tip. So really, you don't even need a tip. You could just cut off the end of your bag. Or, I mean, really, whatever you want to do here. If you wanted to use like a star tip, then maybe you'd have to thicken, you could add a little more sugar to your frosting if it was too thin, if you wanted to pipe like stars or something. We won't get too fancy here. So just make sure you get the air out of your bag, and then twist, and we'll see what we can do here. So we'll just kind of And I mean, you could whatever you could add some nuts and whatever you like. Just have fun with it. So normally what I would do at this point is put it in the fridge, let that firm all up a little, that frosting, but we won't do that. We will cut a piece right now. So just take your sharp knife, cut through, and then what I like to do, so you don't get the, as you can see, your knife gets a little dirty, just clean it off there so you don't get anything in your cake. And just use my knife. And there we have it. I'll put it this way. Doesn't that look gorgeous? It's so, the cake is so moist, and that frosting, cream cheese, a little bit of tang, really goes nicely with the pumpkin. Of course, we will have a little. Yes, that's very nice. The cake is buttery, it's moist, it's nicely spiced. You get and then you get the pumpkin, and then of course, cream cheese frosting is always good. So enjoy, and you have to refrigerate this because of the cream cheese frosting. But it's good in the fridge 2, 3, 4 days. So enjoy, and until next time, I'm Stephanie Jaworski of joyofbaking.com.